I will tell you that there are a few heroes and lots of villains. There are a few heroes in today's society. There are a few people that have stood and stood and stood for a very long time and tried to warn the American people, tried to warn the ruling class, if you will, that there's trouble coming, and knows it inside and out. And one of those heroes, in fact, a guy who I think has given us more time than maybe anybody else besides the Navy SEALs, has been David Horowitz. David Horowitz has been standing guard for a long time. He was a communist. He was raised by communists. He was part of the 1960s radical movement. When he started to see the slaughter after the Vietnam War, he woke up and said, "What? Guys, we were wrong." They didn't care. And he realized it wasn't about the principles. It wasn't really about doing good. It was really about power and control. And he started to talk about that. And he was rejected by the left and the right. And then the right would listen to him. If I'm not mistaken, David, stop me at any time. The right would listen to him when it was advantageous to him, but still, they really didn't get it. David Horowitz is a guy who, when I first started looking into the Tides Foundation and everything else, I found Discover the Networks, which is one of the best tools out there if you really want to know who's connected, how it's connected. It's really complex, very difficult to understand, but he's made more sense of it than anybody else. David Horowitz has a new book out called The New Leviathan: How the Left-Wing Money Machine Shapes American Politics and Threatens America's Future. It is one of the most frightening books you will read because it's all true and all about how far behind anybody who loves freedom really is. David, welcome to the program. How are you, sir?
Thank you, Glenn. Actually, I'm not as pessimistic as my book would lead people, because
breathtaking.
I see a dramatic change in American political life, and that is the awakening of the people, the awakening of conservatives. When I left the left 25 years ago, actually conservatives were quite kind to me, but they didn't really want to take in the message. They were in a kind of denial. Because, first of all, because it was too horrible to contemplate that there are so many people that want to destroy this country. So many Americans, American citizens, Americans born, Americans privileged, especially privileged Americans, who have a hatred in their heart for America. And the second thing is that conservatives don't like politics. If you're a conservative, you're probably in the private sector, you're a creator. Politics is a lot about destruction. You're a creator. If you're running a business, you want every customer possible. So you don't want to get involved in divisive battles. And then kind of the attitudes changed a little, and I got support because here was a guy who was willing to mix it up and get into the street fight. And I don't take any credit for that. That's really all I know how to do. That's the way I was brought up.
But we haven't, all of us, first of all, after communism fell, we all thought, communist is a joke. That was proven wrong. It's not worry. So any hiding communists or anything like that, oh, please, it's ridiculous. Nobody really believes that. And we're all in that moment of, after September 11th, even the progressives, standing there on the steps of the Capitol, holding hands and singing Kumbaya, and everybody thought we're all Americans. No, we're not. No, we're not. And your book outlines the staggering, again, just the appendix is breathtaking. It is the number of groups and how much money they have on the left. Let me just start here. There are 14 liberal groups that have $1 billion in assets.
More than
more than $1 billion in assets. 14. The conservatives have 0. There's nobody on the side of conservatives that have the juice and the power of these foundations.
Let's dramatize it. I mean, the Koch brothers have a foundation. It's worth $239 million. Sounds like a lot of money. The Ford Foundation has $10 billion. It's 30, whatever that is, 35 times the size of the Koch brothers. And, of course, the Gates Foundation is 3 times the size of Ford. The left-wing foundations, and they're the ones that they fund Occupy Wall Street. They fund the radical organizations that gave Obama his start, that trained him, that brought him up through the ranks. They have $104 billion in assets, whereas the conservative foundations have only $10 billion total. 75 conservative foundations. But that's just it's just the base of the iceberg, because they then fund other tax-exempt foundations, 501c3s. For example, the Ford Foundation created the Environmental Resources Defense Council many years ago, and actually it created them to fight DDT. Just to do this very briefly, DDT, the Rockefeller Foundation in the old days when it was a conservative foundation, funded a global malaria eradication program using DDT. Along came the Ford Foundation and the Environmental Resources Defense Council, which now, by the way, has $139 million in assets. It's grown to gigantic size. It started with this malaria campaign. They conducted a campaign against DDT using Rachel Carson's famous, or it should be infamous book, The Silent Spring, which claimed that DDT would kill all the birds. Completely false, no scientific basis, but it's a classic of the environmental movement. They persuaded even the Nixon administration to ban DDT. And so malaria returned. And malaria kills 3 million people a year. It's killed, since the ban on DDT, 100 million people globally. 95% of them are black children under the age of 5 in Africa. All this blood is on the heads and the hands of the Ford. Well, without the Ford Foundation, this never would have happened.
Ford Foundation, I was talking to a friend who actually knew Henry Ford. And he said they were having lunch together one time, and he said the worst thing I ever did was let go control of the foundation because it went off the rails. They always do that. We
print in our book, The New Leviathan, we print Henry Ford's resignation letter from the board, which says in so many words that you are attacking the very system. The Ford Foundation is dedicated now to attacking the very system that created this wealth. And, in his behalf, he had to save the Ford Motor Company, which was in the hands of a gangster after his grandfather died in 1947. And that's why he let the president of Studebaker, who turned out to be a progressive, be president. And that's true of a lot of, most of the venerable American foundations.
So how do we...
Rockefeller is now a left-wing foundation. Carnegie, Hewlett, Packard, Kellogg, Casey, Joyce, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac are funding the left. These are government-backed institutions.
When you have Soros join this...
And Soros.
I mean, how do you possibly win, David?
Well...
Because we haven't even talked about the universities. The universities are the think tanks now.
Of the left, right. Look, I had this experience. I was on a panel in Paris in 1986, organized by the Committee for the Free World. And we had the Vietnamese there. It was an anniversary of America's defeat in Vietnam, the French. And I was on a panel, and the topic of the panel was, is communism reversible? This is 1986. And nobody thought it was. I certainly didn't. And 3 years later, it was gone. The fact of the matter is that America is, first of all, it's not like European countries. We are an individualist country. We were founded by individualists. We had a frontier, which created an incredible spirit of independence. If you didn't like the way things were here, you went west a little ways and you founded your own, and you did it on these principles. And these were the founders. It's not just the original founders, but all along the way, the founders of America were incredible people. I think of the Mormons who went across the country and then they came to Salt Lake and they said, hey, let's build it here in the middle of nowhere,
Yeah.
Or as I was saying to Glenn earlier, Dallas, there's a little shack in the middle, a log cabin actually in the middle of Dallas, where some guy had walked across the plains, and you have to be to Texas to see how vast it is, and said, hey, I'm going to stop here, and this is where I'm going to raise, do whatever I did. And he was the founder of Dallas. That spirit is so antithetic to everything these collectivists want to do that I still think we have a fighting chance.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to you a little bit about, because the book lays out the path to presidency for Obama and how everything was just a network of these radical progressives. We'll get into that here in a second. The name of the book is The New Leviathan by David Horowitz, and it's the dirt on how this machine that they've built really works. We'll come back to David here in just a second. Our sponsor